Good morning. My name is Rev G. Stewart, and I, along with Rev Ed Tansey, welcome our Facebook family this morning to our Sunday talk. And we are the founding ministers of Center for Spiritual Living Greater Boston, and we are located in beautiful Cambridge, Massachusetts at 50 Dudley Street. So if you are ever in the neighborhood, I would welcome you to come in and experience the love that fills this room. Is there a lot of love filling this room?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And that's what we're about here, is the love. So if you're ever in the area, we really want to be a part of that love, that we can experience it with you. So here at the center, we learn to and practice this wonderful philosophy that we call the science of mind, which is the study of life and the nature of the laws of thought. It was Reverend Dr. Ernest Holmes who studied and synthesized the science of mind philosophy as he studied science, religion, and philosophy, and used them as in the way that he felt were the commonalities that would assist humanity to live in close connection with the God of their understanding. And that's what this whole philosophy is about, is getting that deeper feeling of the divine presence, or whatever we want to call it. It can be a scientific principle, it can be whatever it is, because it doesn't care. But we use it all the time. So it's really about recognizing that we are using this power all the time so that we can have a blissful life. And that's what we're looking for, is that blissful life. So I invite you folks at home to visit our website, cslboston.org, to find out more about our spiritual community, how it can serve you, how you can serve us. And also, if you are being fed by if you're being spiritually fed by our message this morning, we welcome you to include us in your prosperity circulation and tithing practice with your tax-deductible contribution that you can make right online. So we thank you in advance for your continued support of our purpose in the world and what we are called to fulfill, which is co-creating a world that works for everyone and all of creation. So Rev Ed wanted to share something this morning in our spiritual practices, being that it's Father's Day, and we are celebrating the divine masculine, which is what I love to call it, because we are all masculine and feminine. So if you would come up and share with that.
Thank you. So one of our practices every morning is we read from the Daily Word, and I just thought today's was very, very special. And it says, "Blessing for fathers. I honor all father figures in my prayers. Today is an opportunity to recognize and honor the fatherly influences in my life, whether their role is a parent, mentor, teacher, or coach. Their encouragement and guidance gave me the gift of believing in myself. My prayers also include fathers and stepfathers who are new to the role, learning the importance, dedication, and patience it takes. I bless the role models who are helping to build life skills I pray they live in this awareness and enjoy the experience of watching children discover who they are and what they are capable of achieving." And so it is.
Thank you, Rev Ed.
You're welcome.
So, our 2019 Centers for Spiritual Living theme is spirituality in action, and for June, it is empowerment. I protect the vulnerable. And today's talk is creating meaningful conversation. Don't you love that? And it looks so free and easy. And wouldn't it be nice if that's the way it always was, right? So, in the quote for the month of June, Ernest Holmes tells us this: "If day by day we have a greater understanding and a clearer concept, if daily we are realizing more of truth and applying it in our actions, then we are on the right path, and eventually we shall be made free. And that's what it's all about, is gaining that freedom to have the full and beautiful lives that we're meant to have, right? So that's what this is all about. So in order for us to get this greater understanding that Dr. Ernest Holmes is talking about, we must create meaningful conversation. Would you agree? It's very important. So it is through meaningful communication that we not only allow personal growth, but we allow for the growth of others in that conversation. Would you agree? When we have meaningful conversation. We know that there's also that fluff conversation that's kind of like, why am I here and what am I doing this for? Anybody ever been there?
Yeah.
You go, okay, what's next? So this is why we need meaningful conversation, and why I'm talking about creating meaningful conversation today. So today what I'd like to share with you is I would like to share with you the two important elements of meaningful conversation, creating meaningful conversation in our lives and in the world, and understanding that it all begins within. Well, these are the 3 points I want to make today. So the two elements of meaningful conversation are, first, listening to understand. And that means being curious when you're speaking with people. You know, opening up and listening with your heart. You know, as a spiritual practice, and gee whiz, I think everybody in the room here is in the Essential Ernest Holmes class. So, and that was that not our spiritual practice for this week, right? So isn't that interesting that my talk coincides so beautifully? But is that not the synchronicity of the universe, right? It's always working synchronistically. So as a spiritual practice, we call it sacred listening. And this means not listening in order to respond or reply, as this means, if we're doing that we're actually just trying to get our opinion on the table when I'm listening to reply. So it's about listening with your heart. I like to say it's like listening with our God ears. As we listen with our God ears, we're so much deeper, we're so much more connected. The second element of this creating meaningful conversation is offering ourselves the same deep listening. We don't often do that for ourselves. Think about it. We don't listen to ourselves the way we need to sometimes. Now you might ask, how can we do this? Well, one of the ways we can do this is through journaling. In a journaling process, when you know you're thinking about something and you're holding an idea or a belief about it, you take that to the journaling and you ask yourself, what, can you tell me more about that? What do you really mean? And then allow yourself to write. But you can also do this with conversation with others. As I said before in that first part, when we share going back and forth, it's another way for us to hear ourselves more deeply. And when that other person gives us that curiosity of wanting to know more about our position or where we are on things, it opens up for better understanding and clarity. Would you agree? Mm-hmm. So it's listening with the heart. So thus, we're really opening up to hear what both parties are saying. Not just what I'm saying, but what you're saying. So it's that sharing. If you're not familiar with deep listening or you haven't had that experience, I would definitely recommend getting a practitioner session, because you will know what deep listening is by having a practitioner session, because that's what practitioners are taught to do, is to deep listen, is to hear beyond the outer story to the deeper story that's going on in your life. And that's the beauty of that, of having that opportunity and having practitioners in our communities. A great way to heal something that may be going on in your life and has gone on for a while, and that you haven't been able to get to the bottom of by yourself. And there's nothing wrong with that. We love prayer around here, and working with practitioners is a great way to deepen our prayer practice. So it's a great way to do that. And then the second point that I wanted to make is that you know, what are some ways that we can create more meaningful conversation in our lives and in the world? Well, I went online and I found a website called livingroomconversation.org. And if you've never been there, it's really cool. It is a really cool site. And that offered some great ways to build greater, deeper, and more meaningful conversations. And you know, we also have here with CSL, we have the opportunity to join greater conversations in our community with our diversity and inclusion group, who is actually, they have Zoom meetings where you can actually join in and get into conversations about diversity, inclusion, and what we're trying to do as an organization in that place. So it's really, that's a great opportunity. But getting back to the livingroomconversations.org, I found these outlines that create, for creating your own meaningful conversations. And so when you are creating questions or for discussion, they recommend the following. They recommend being curious, which I said before, didn't I say? That curiosity, wanting to know more. And it's also about what would you ask if you did not have your own opinion or position already on that? What would you ask if you didn't have that opinion or that position? And then it's also to examine what your own position is on the topic, and notice if you are framing questions that favor your viewpoint or disallow others their viewpoint. That's a big one, right? So, and then another one that they offer is that, you know, how did you develop your own perspective? So get into that in creating your questions and for this discussion, and what questions would bring that out. And then the last one is beware of including trigger words in your questions like climate change, anti-anything, rights and control, because these can be trigger words that cause for not open and free conversation. So it's about using inclusive language, open-ended languaging. So that's how we do that. So it's really so here is a video that I'd like to share with you today, and this is from that living room, from the Creating Living Room Conversation, and I really love this. Hopefully this will work for us. There we go.
am a former neo-Nazi white supremacist skinhead. I've been disengaged for almost 25 years. A lot of my life has really revolved around trying to stand the gap so that I don't transmit generational trauma that was like part of my story, and then from my own choices onto my children.
I would just point out that this conversation would be virtually impossible to have on social media before a bunch of trolls just went after you.
A lot of times when one shares their point of view, the other person hears it as, oh, so you're saying my point of view is wrong just because you have a different point of view. So now we just have to battle. And that's so sad.
That we're not just trying to form a consensus or a resolution, that we're just trying to better understand ourselves, to grow in our understanding, and take the time to listen to the experiences of one another.
If I can have the opportunity to listen to others so that I can gain more of a universal understanding, then I can essentially, I guess, condition myself to be a more inclusive human being. That's what drew me to a conversation like that.
And I love the thought of just gathering to discuss things that are hard to talk about and things that I think have been just swept under the rug and kind of called progress. But I don't think that, I don't know, sometimes I think we haven't made as much progress as we think we have.
The type of conversation that we've had here has been longer and gone a little deeper than some others, but these are conversations that I see people having, and sooner or later it's going to reset the paradigm in terms of the character of what our culture, our country, everything. So I'm open for it.
The denial of the presence of people in any capacity it's a denial of our own reality because we, like Shannon said before, we're interdependent. So it's like, if I try to imagine a world where everybody is just like me, it's just a waste of energy because it's not reality anyway. So why not just get to know people as they are, and like as we engage in each other's stories, we become different people.
But I look at the rise of identity politics, and the most noxious to me as a white person is white nationalism. But I would just be afraid of political demagogues that would exploit that to divide us, and that's why I always, as a libertarian, I always want to get to that commonality. I just want to make sure that in America we don't fall into that trap, and obviously we're seeing some of that today, and that's what worries me.
I don't think race should be a concept that we accept in this country or just in the world.
I'm still surprised when I encounter someone who has that same kind of attitude and just assumes because I'm a white person that I hold that same attitude. That kind of infuriates me.
I'm used to being criticized by, like, you know, my black liberal friends and so forth for keeping company with conservatives, and then around conservatives, I'm used to being criticized for giving so much credence to left-wing social perspectives on various things, you know. And so I enjoy these sorts of conversations with people like yourselves. And I really think that there is sort of a swelling of this type of, you know, consciousness, I guess, in this country right now. I feel it.
So that's pretty powerful, isn't it? Hearing people's feelings and opinions and realizing that.
I
Oops.
am.
Thank you. We don't need to see it again. So you can see how using some of these methods that they're talking about, that I mentioned before, can really open up, and we encourage probing the complex things that appear to be going on in our world, right? Because we have to live in this world. Even though we are spiritual beings having a human experience, we need to live in this world, and we need to be able to live in this world in a way that is bringing us peace and not anxiety and fear and limitation, because that's not what life is really meant to be. And it's about doing our spiritual practice, right? And really doing the spiritual practice of sacred listening. So this opens us to hear the views of people that have a different experience in life than us, because we all have different experiences, and it's so important to realize that. So another method is to think about moving out of the either or thinking, and instead thinking and talking into both and. Think about that. The either or is my way or the highway, right? But the both and, so let me hear you, now you can hear me, and we can say both and what else? How can this come together? So it's really a beautiful way to bring about that peace. Ultimately, we are opening to hear the divine mind as it expresses in its infinite individualized beings of creation. Would you agree?
Mm-hmm.
And believe me, sometimes those infinite creations can be a test, right? We all go through it. They can definitely be a test to us. And yet we still have the opportunity to say, let me hear you. Let me really hear you. Because many times when what I find is so interesting is that some people are calling out for love. Those most difficult people that we run into our life are really calling out for love. And so that's the important thing to recognize. So this brings us to understanding that it all begins within, right? Because that's where it all starts. It isn't out here. If I'm working out here, what am I doing? I'm rearranging deck furniture on the Titanic, right? Because it's all going down. How many of us try to balance or juggle, right? All those balls. And it's like, no, I need to start within. So to do this, we begin with our spiritual practices, right? The ones that call to us. This begins the work from within to the without, right? Because if I move from within out, then I'm going to see the changes in my world. I'm going to see the changes that I want to experience. So just as we begin every meeting in this organization or every activity with prayer or an invocation, it's kind of good for us to think about doing that in our day-to-day life, right? Like if I'm going into an activity that maybe is bringing up a little bit of anxiety, it's okay to stop and do something for yourself. You don't have to say it out loud. You don't have to, but you could be in a group and say, can we start with a prayer? And try to set a tone before the activity begins. But if you set the tone within yourself, if that opportunity isn't within the activity, then you set the tone to be in a place of really deep listening, to be present in meaningful conversation with people. So that's a real important thing. You know, it could be as simple as, and I came up with this little thing that you could say to yourself, let me be an inquisitive, empowering, and curious listener and sharer in this activity. That can be your little invocation before you begin something. I'm going to say that again. Let me be an inquisitive, empowering, and curious listener and sharer in this activity. Doesn't that set a great tone? You feel the tone that's being set? Because it's that curiosity. I want to know more. I can see that there's some pain going on for you. Can I know more? Can you tell me more? Can you let me know what's going on? So it's really about loving each other, really, ultimately. So this allows for the situation to come forth. What really wants to happen in any situation. This allows for what really wants to happen to happen. You know, Ernest Holmes tells us that the universe exists for the expression of spirit, and humanity exists for self-expression. We are the expression of spirit. So if I remember that all the time, it's very easy to be that place of holding space, even in the difficult conversations. And I don't like to say difficult conversations because it sets a tone, does it not? I don't want to set that. So it's just a conversation. But sometimes there is that appearance that it feels difficult or hard to get at. So we are indeed the expressions of, if we are indeed the expressions of spirit, then that means we are not just a few or those that agree with me. So that means I can't just look at it as just the ones who agree with me. I need to look at all of those. All are expressions of spirit. You know, we say around here that everything is God. That all there is God. And if we realize that and we recognize that, then we have to really be in that place of opening up to that divine expression to come from those who are even difficult or hard to deal with. Because it actually opens up possibilities. Last week I spoke about inherent wholeness or the divine wholeness. I mentioned that in my talk, which was coming from the quote from the book of the month. And when I look at divine wholeness in meaningful conversation, it begins a powerful and empowering possibility for spirit to really be heard in the conversation. Would you agree? So that means coming from a place of knowing my wholeness and not from a place of thinking something is missing. That's so big. How often? But because as kids we were brought up believing that stuff, right? There's something missing. There's not enough. There's not this. There's all of those pieces that are missing. And yet when we were kids, we didn't think anything was missing. You know, so the people that we loved around us were just trying to help us to experience life better, the best that they could, and the best that they knew how. But it's okay to let that go now. It doesn't serve you anymore, does it? It's okay to say, you know what, I'm all set, I'm all done. I don't need this anymore. Because there's nothing missing. It's all right there. And all you have to do is go within and grab it and take it. And then it comes out. So Ernest Holmes also tells us that we must continually remind ourselves of the power of the word and of our ability to use it. We must know that truth produces freedom because truth is freedom. knowing the truth is our freedom, right? That's what makes us free. But understanding the power of our word. Because if I understand the power of my word, I'm opening up that possibility and that meaningful conversation. So this truth that he's talking about comes from looking deeper and having those deeper, meaningful conversations. That's where the truth comes from. I have found, and I mentioned this before, I have found that the cries of anger and hurt and pain are really cries for love. Love me. Let me know that I am important. And I'm important enough for you to listen to me. When you've had someone really deeply listen to you, have you felt different? You feel empowered, don't you? You feel strong. Somebody cares. Somebody wants to hear me. And it's all about the love. It's all about the love. So we at Centers for Spiritual Living, which we are Centers for Spiritual Living, which means we are to practice daily living spiritually. Do you agree? That's why we're Centers for Spiritual Living, because it's about living spiritually daily. So will you join me in being a space of healing and inclusion in this next week?
Yes.
Good. Glad to hear that. And you're going to really listen to others?
Yes.
Spiritually listen, deeply listen. Beautiful. And we're going to take the time to really listen to ourselves, will we not? Will you join me in that? Really listen to yourself. Really hear what's going on inside of you. If we join together to do this, we will indeed live up to what we are called to fulfill, which comes from our purpose, right? Which is co-creating a world that works for everyone and for all of creation. It sounds huge. It's not. It begins one person at a time. And that's all it is. And that just ripples out and touches so many lives. Because we're creating an attracting energy of love. That's drawing people into us so that we can make a difference in the world. And that's what we're going to do. So this is about living up to our annual theme, which is spirituality in action. Would you agree? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Namaste.
Namaste.
It's lovely. Oh, sorry. There is a power and a presence that is omniscient, all-knowing, omnipresent, everywhere at the same time, omnipotent, all-powerful, and that power is within me. I know the truth of my being. I am one with the one, and I am empowered by that knowing, by knowing my truth. And I know that for each person that is here today, that each one of us has within us the power to be the full, rich presence of God within, because that's really what we are. And when we are that, we are light and love and beauty and peace and power and truth and joy and wisdom. I could go on and on and on with the words and the truth of who we really are. And when we accept this truth about that presence within, we can experience a life of joy. And I know that for each and every one of us here today, the words that were spoken in this particular talk were so powerful about how we engage with each other. And I know that we are really, each of us, divinely guided and led to the best kinds of conversations, especially when we know our truth. Because when we know our truth, we choose to be that light and that love and that joy that you experience with other people in their lives. So that is what we each are. And I am grateful for this knowing. I am grateful to know that each one of us can live a joy-filled life. And I put this out to the law of mind, knowing that each one of us experiences the truth right here and right now, that has wonderful conversation, that knows how to do it instinctively and joyfully because we know the truth about who each of us is And with that, please join me and say, so it is.
Thank you, Barbara. That was a beautiful treatment. It really set the tone. It kind of anchored what we spoke about, didn't it? All right, so if you could put up the slide for the affirmation. And let's share in the affirmation together. Let's read it together. As I listen with an open heart and soft eyes, I find truth as unexpected dwelling places, until I remember there is only one of us. Let's do that one more time. As I listen with an open heart and soft eyes, I find truth as unexpected dwelling places, until I remember there is only one of us. And that comes to us from Reverend Linda Finley, Center for Spiritual Living, Eugene, in Oregon.